You're looking at Doug Powers there in the foreground, who has a story about the rescues that Guanyin Bodhisattva can do. Doug, against advice, nobody ever stopped Doug from an adventure. Doug was on an adventure. He was in Terengganu, East Malaysia, the east coast of Western Malaysia, that is. And he wanted to go to K2, the mountain, and climb it. He wanted to get up to Nepal and climb K2. Well, against advice, he got up there and he fell off K2, or was pushed off. Not clear. Landed on a rock ledge, didn't fall into a crevasse and vanish, but he landed on a rock ledge, broke many bones in his body, and spent the next couple days conversing with Guanyin Bodhisattva, who kept him alive. His consciousness left his body. He was looking back at his broken body on this rock ledge in a snowstorm in Nepal. On K2, and remarkably, as the Royal Nepali Air Force helicopter lifted him off the ridge and got him back on a plane to the Stanford Hospital where the doctors repaired his bones, Doug's faith in Guanyin Bodhisattva reached a place that has never wavered. So, personal stories of rescue from Guanyin. Some of these individuals in the photo people will recognize, like Nipun, for example. Nipun Metta, David Rounds, and other friends.
We got to Malaysia, and we were, I think, in Terengganu, Ding Jalo, on the east coast of Malaysia. And Doug had decided that this was his opportunity to do some serious heavy-duty mountain climbing. And this was the autumn, and so the time was right that he needed, this was the farthest northern spot of our delegation from which he needed to get to K2 if he was going to beat the snows and climb Annapurna, one of the world's third tallest mountain. And so he notified Shifu, Shifu, I've got to go, he said. And Shifu said, go where? Gole. And Mila Pusa, Gole, Mila Pusa, right? Maitreya Bodhisattva is his name. So Doug said, well, Shifu, I've got to beat the snowfall or else I won't be able to go up. This is my last chance. I really got to go. And Shifu said, you're going where? I'm going to climb the mountain, Shifu. I really got to go. Shifu got that long, they call it the 1,000-foot stair in the 50-foot room. He's kind of like that. And Shifu says, well, you don't have to go right away. Oh, Shifu, I really have to go now, because if I don't go now, I might not get another chance. Shifu says, well, you should. Why don't you wait a little? No, Shifu, I got to go. It might snow. Well, what if I guarantee that it won't snow? No, Shifu, I really got to go. But I could almost promise that it won't snow if you'd wait a while. Shifu, I got to go. And Shifu, Shifu says, 可以. Then he said, but be careful who you make friends with. Then Shifu came to us and said, talk him out of it. So we're like, Doug, you sure, did you? Shifu was really, no man, I really got to go. I got the equipment, What was his equipment? He had some tennis shoes. When you go up Annapurna, you go up with oxygen tanks, and you get porters and Sherpas and crampons and ice axes and ropes, and Doug went up. So Doug left. So we go on, and we're now in Alor Star. We went up the coast. We're up the northern boundary of Malaysia, where it meets Thailand, and we get this phone call. And I think it's Hung Shun, who was back at Gold Mountain at that point. He said, did you hear the news? No, what news? Doug Powers has just been airlifted into the Stanford Hospital. He broke every bone in his body. We're like, what happened? What happened? We don't know. We'll tell you as soon as we find out if he's still alive. So Shifu said, I told him not to go. But we heard that Doug got to the ranger station at the base of Annapurna, and the ranger said, you're not allowed to go up by yourself no matter what. And so he said, well, you got to have somebody to go with me. So this guy comes out of the shadows and says, I'll go with you. And if this were a movie, you'd hear, dun, 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 dun. This is the person Shifu warned him against. So don't go up there with just anybody.
Actually, the guy I went up there with was just coming off of heroin in the Golden Triangle in Burma.
There you go. Perfect companion.
Okay. So he was the perfect companion.
So he goes up, and the first night is kind of okay at the base camp. Then they go up a little higher the next night, and then the third night, a big snowfall. And it's a big snowfall, and everything's like whited out. And Doug goes out of his tent. It's not clear whether he missed his step or whether he might have been pushed, but the next thing he knows, he's doing a somersault through the air and then wham, onto a rock ledge like this, he said, and just landed smash. And actually, you can't. He's not wearing his beard now, but if you look carefully, his face has two halves to it because they rebuilt.
Dr. Lee has actually worked on that.
Okay. So he hit the rock ledge and smashed the bone, literally crashed, smushed the bones. And he said that he was, the way I tell the story, was that his, just exactly like that. That's how it went. Boom, just like that. Wham. Wah la la yi sheng. He said that the pain was so intense that he left his body, and he was out there watching his body like be crushed on this small ledge. And had he missed that ledge, it would have been, many, many hundreds of feet down. And so he had a discussion about pain with himself. And then he heard this voice. And this voice was saying things like, oh, you think this is pain? Well, you're out of your body. What hurts? And he talked about that. And then talked about, if I were you, I would probably recite the name of Guanyin Bodhisattva. And so Doug says, yeah, I have been reciting Guanyin Bodhisattva. And so he said, yeah, well, what's the experience as you recite Guanyin Bodhisattva? And he realized that he was having a conversation with Guanyin Bodhisattva, who kept him alive in a conversation for the 2 days that it took for the Royal Nepali Air Force helicopter to come up and discover him on the ledge. Because when he hadn't come back down, the ranger notified the Nepali Air Force that they had somebody missing. And at this point, his parents found out about it. So the helicopter came in, spotted him, pulled him off, and somehow, I don't know how it happened, but he found himself on a jet chartered to head off to Stanford for emergency surgery.
And he also, Shifu, actually, before I left, I said to him, well, it's going to cost me more money to go for this out. And he says, well, okay, I'll give you any amount of money you want right now.
If you'll
stay. Yeah, if you'll stay. And I said, no, that's okay. Pretty much when I got back, though, I was in the Buddha hall, and I showed up in the Buddha hall, and Shifu says, ah! Were you there? He says, come up. He says, come up here. I said, what? He says, well, what are you doing? I said, yeah, I had a little problem. He says, how many times did I tell you to not go up there? And I said, maybe 3 or more. He said, yeah. And so you went anyway. I said, yeah. So he said, well, he says, I have to tell everybody here that you died. And he said, you died on the mountains. And he said, what I hope is you don't make as big a mess out of this life as the last one. He says, you got a new life. You must have something to do or something. You got a new life, but I just hope you don't make a big mess out of this one.
The new one.
The new one as you did is that one, yeah. Fortunately, at that time, we were all cultivating pretty seriously. We were doing all the sessions. We were doing all the chants. We were really serious. So, we had a little bit of cultivation. You don't actually get to use your cultivation until you get in an emergency. But the problem is that what you do learn is that when you're in an emergency situation like that, then if you have the cultivation available, then you can use the actual recitation to actually not be in the pain. And you can actually, I mean, I couldn't do that just on a regular basis with my legs. I mean, I can feel the pain right away, but when you're in an emergency situation, it's a different situation. And you can actually use that cultivation to hold your mind in a certain kind of place, and you can actually watch it go and pay attention to the pain and then be caught up in it or move away from it. And so I have to actually tell you, I was there for quite a few days, and I have to honestly tell you that if I could really recite, I actually had the thought, this isn't really any different than being anywhere else, as long as you could recite. If I couldn't recite, then it was like very painful.
你呀，如果不念观音菩萨的话，掉到山涧里一定是没有命了，粉身碎骨连骨头都没有了，把你那个身体呀。皮血肉筋骨就摔得像那个面粉那么碎，看不见了，找不着你的尸首。遇到这种呢危难的时候，你能不忘了念观世音菩萨，一定会有大感应的。观世音菩萨来救护你，令你逢凶化吉，是遇难成祥。为而不为，是闲而不闲，能有这样的感应。
但是这个妙法呀，一般人都不知道，所以在那个最危险的时候都想不起来念观世音菩萨。你要是能在最危险那个时候想起念观世音菩萨，你只要能在那个最危险的时候，你能念观世音菩萨，都有感应的，一定会得到这个救，观音菩萨会来救助你。但是怎么样的呢？但是你要有一种信心，不要将信讲疑的，